They put a paywall in front of it this year. So we've been doing this, playoff probability week in, week out. It's been so much fun because, let's face it, the Broncos aren't supposed to be in this position. They had a 1% playoff probability after the first 2 weeks of the season. Even after the loss, Phil, I think it was 82% coming into the game. The Broncos' playoff probability is at 77% still. If you told me that in August when we're sitting out at training camp in the heat, and I said, you're going to go in the final week of the year just needing to win one game against Kansas City's backups, and you're going to be in the postseason, I would have fell out of my chair.
Yeah, I would have looked down because we were on top of a hill looking down at the team, and I'm looking at the team and looking at you like, what are you smoking?
Dude, and
what are you smoking?
And here we are, but I don't feel like the way that I would have if you told me we were going to be here in August.
Yeah.
Just living through the sequences here.
Yeah, I mean, it's that phrase I talked about when I was with the Houston Texans, and I asked a couple guys about that run where the Houston Texans were doing well. They were beating a lot of teams. Was it 2019?
Yes.
I want to say 2019. Yes. They're in a playoff game with the Kansas City Chiefs. They're beating them up 28, 31, something like that, 28-0.
Yeah, I think it was 23-0.
Okay, 23-0.
Yep.
And you end up losing that game, and all hell broke loose after that game for the Houston Texans, and they kind of went downhill. And I asked, what was that year like? And Reed, actually, who's the safety for the Kansas City Chiefs right now, he said, dude, we were winning games, but it felt like we were losing. Everybody would come in the locker room after a win, and we would argue with the coaches. We would argue with each other. It just didn't feel like a family locker room. It did not feel like we were winning these games. That's how I feel right now with the Denver Broncos because we're not winning.
Well, and they're actually losing these
games. And they're
games.
losing games. And we're sitting here saying, well, they still have a 77% chance to get to the playoffs. That's fine and dandy, and I'm great, and I'm all about going to the playoffs. I'm all about winning, though. I'm all about having some momentum going into the playoffs.
Right.
And right now you're saying because we handle business early and because there's a lot of bad teams out there is the reason why we're going to be in the playoffs this year. That's what it's looking like. And to me, it's like, okay, cool, but I'm upset as well because I want the wins. I want the results. Yeah. I want to be able to get into the playoffs and make some noise, not just be there, but be able to boogie a little bit. Dance a little bit, Zach.
You know who reminds me of that situation, that kind of like profile that you just described with the Texans, that even though they were winning, it still felt like they were losing?
Yeah.
Conversation for probably not even today, but definitely not for right now, the Nuggets. Phil, even and again, I don't want to get too deep into the wormhole, but you look at some of these wins like New Orleans in overtime, Sacramento by a single point. And it's been like, dude, something's off here.
Yeah.
And the winning is not masking it, for me anyway.
And then you got Detroit. That was a big win.
Big win against those Pistons.
Big win.
After giving up, 149 in regulation to the Cavs.
Yeah.
That is psychotic. 149 points in regulation, unheard of, quite literally. Second highest point total in Cavs history, and the highest point total given up in regulation by the Denver Nuggets since 1991. We'll kick the can down the road for that conversation. So living through it, just tell me, how upset did the loss make you against Cincinnati?
Oh, I'm upset. I'm still upset. And if I'm a player in that locker room, I'm upset because you had 3 opportunities. Now you have one more opportunity to seal the deal, and now you have to be tight in that locker room. When you lose a game in the NFL, when you go into that organization, you have to walk on eggshells. And now because you put yourself in a situation to still get to the playoffs, that's fine and dandy. But as a team, as a player, you're not feeling good about this.
Right.
You're not feeling good about what's going on with you guys. You guys are trying to figure things out. You want to win these games. It's important to build some momentum. I know Sean talked about not believing in certain momentum swings, but winning these games, it helps build momentum, especially when you got to go to Buffalo, New York.
See, and this is and this is what Thursday night cost them.
Yeah.
This is what the loss on Thursday Night Football. And that's why it's so dumb. I just can't. I'm not letting anyone talk. I guess, us out of this. We didn't like opting into that dumb Thursday night football game as a road team. So stupid. So you had extra time to prepare for Cincinnati, and then you went and lost that game anyway.
And then you went and lost the game. You play this Thursday night game. I don't want to get started, but you play a Thursday night game, and everybody in the NFL, if you're a player, you hate that game. You hate Thursday night games. Your body hurts. Mentally, you're not prepared. Physically, you're not prepared. The game plan's not all the way put together. You're banking on the other team to be hurt so that you can go out there and run the ball and you have a better defense. It's just not a good thing to do on Thursday nights. And when you opt into that situation because it gives you a better situation down the road against the Cincinnati Bengals and you lose that game, it's like, what do we do all this for? You put yourself in a bad spot, bad spot.
Yep. And had they won these games, they're not going to Buffalo. And look, I don't want to act like Buffalo is this invincible operation because their defense has regressed in such a major way, much like the Broncos defense here in this last month. The Broncos have one of the league's worst defense here in the month of December, and they're just not playing well. And I know someone out there is maybe saying, hey, you're sounding ungrateful because here the Broncos are on the doorstep of their first playoff since 2015. But the product, it's not – the defense is regressing. 31st total defense in the month of December. That was the strength of the team.
Yeah.
It was really Vance Joseph's defense. It doesn't feel like that right now. It doesn't look like that right now, and certainly the numbers don't say that.
But come on now, Zach.
Oh, you're going to defend Vance.
You know I'm going to defend
Here
Vance.
we go.
You know I'm going to defend the defense because the defense is the reason why we're in this situation anyway. The defense is the reason why we're going to the playoffs. And honestly, when you have a situation where the Bengals get sacked, Joe Burrow gets sacked 7 times, the defense is doing their job. Now, of course, Joe Burrow was slicing us up. But I keep saying this, guys. Joe Burrow is top 3 or top 5, and he's not number 5. They have an elite offense. They just have a bad defense. I'm talking about the Bengals. All right, you can look at Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is a top 10 quarterback. So the defense is playing against elite quarterbacks. Now, I'm not giving them an excuse. They need to find a way to be more stout. But they're also finding ways to make big plays when it matters the most. That's getting the sacks. That's getting a couple turnovers. Pat Surtain's forced fumble to put us in a great momentum swing moment. And now Bo Nix can do his job. It doesn't get done. Bo Nix gets intercepted. That's not on the defense. And it's not always going to be, hey, the defense goes out there and stops the offense and goes 3 and out. That's not how it goes. Now, I do agree. They've been struggling in December.
They have.
But at some point, when do they get a break? When does the offense start to just to turn their jets on? Like, it has to go hand in hand, and they're not playing complementary football when it comes to all 3 units.
No, they're not. They're not. Broncos will still be in the playoffs. I think the Broncos are going to win this weekend. They have to win, right?
You would think.
Well,
you would think, Zach.
No, I know, and look, I told you before the Christmas break and everything, I don't like the scenario of playing the backups. I really don't. I don't like the potential mindset coming in when you know Kelsey and Chris Jones and Mahomes aren't playing because you don't know the mindset of the guys who are playing, who get an opportunity, in which they otherwise probably wouldn't.
There's only one mindset for this team, the Denver Broncos. That's winning the game. You have a quote-unquote JV team out there. Punish them. This is your first chance to go to the playoffs. There is no mindset like, oh, that's the JV. This is not preseason. Go out there and handle business.
Agreed. Full agree. The decision that Sean Payton made at the end of regulation to not go for 2 and to elect to go into an overtime session with the Bengals.
Yeah.
This is what Sean Payton said after the game.
I'm going to answer this now. All right, going for 2. We knew a tie, though, was for us just as beneficial as a win. And we felt like we had the momentum at that point. So, look, it went back and forth. In the end, we didn't make enough plays. They did.
Here's a little bit more.
Going into this game, I knew all of that stuff. And so a lot of it is your gut relative to, how the toss goes. We were moving a little bit on offense and then weighing the percentages of the 2-point conversion. I think that had a lot to do with it. If the tie element didn't sit in there, it would probably been a little bit easier decision. Obviously, I'm going to get asked the question either way. And so I was comfortable with the decision. We had plenty of time with the decision.
Okay, so there's so much of this that I can't stand.
What's wrong? Get it off your chest. What's wrong?
Well, one, the decision to go into overtime
You didn't like it?
I hated it
Why?
in the moment. In the
Why?
moment. And well, I'll get to the layers of why I hated it here in a second. But the fact that before overtime starts, that a tie could be put on the scale of decision making. If there's 2 minutes left in overtime, then yeah, it's got to, I think, heavily weigh into what you do. But the fact that the tie was put on the scale of decision making before the overtime ever started, to me, is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard.
But why?
It's dumb.
You tie, you win.
Listen to you. If we win, we get ice cream. If we lose, we get ice cream. How can you put the tie on the scale of decision making before overtime starts?
Because you have two options.
And you're an aggressive coach. And you're an aggressive coach. But the tie is the thing that breaks the tie?
Because you go out there and you score, you win the game. But how the game has been going, all right, the first 2 quarters, it was slow. So it's like if you have a situation which the Denver Broncos were in, where if they get a couple first downs, you can bleed the clock out and it is a tie and you end up going to the playoffs.
That is just a wild mindset to me.
But it almost happened again yesterday night. Commanders versus the Atlanta Falcons. So it happens.
Yes.
So for Sean to be able to weigh that, I don't think it's a bad idea.
29 times in 50 years.
It's there, though,
There's
29 times.
And I'm not saying that it shouldn't come into play during overtime. But the fact, look, Sean's gut said go for 2. That's what he's paid for.
Well,
is Sean an aggressive coach?
He is an aggressive coach.
He doesn't get that title anymore.
Why?
You don't get that title anymore.
Because he decides to go with his gut and say, hey, look.
So you're aggressive when times when it doesn't matter, but when there's real stakes, you're conservative as it can possibly be.
But it has to come down to trust. It has to come down to the trust factor. Obviously, Sean did not trust Bo in that situation. So he said, you know what? Let's take 10 more minutes of football. Let's find a way to get on the board.
Will they have to score to win the game?
Yeah, if you score, you win the game.
So the same team and offense and quarterback that you don't trust to go 3 yards, you'd rather play 10 extra minutes of football.
Because it opens the playbook up. And because you can still rely on your special teams. Because you can still rely on your defense.
If only the Broncos
was able to do a couple things to help the offense out.
They did. We didn't know that was going to happen at the time of the decision. But if only the Broncos had an offensive genius that had a play that could go 3 yards. If only they had one. Because that's what Sean's supposed to be, isn't he?
He's supposed to be
Is he a great play caller?
But the fact is this. Sean is the head coach, and in his gut, it started like, hey, let's go for 2. But obviously, he got talked out of it. Maybe by somebody else, maybe by himself. Maybe he said, you know what, I'm second-guessing this. Let's just go into overtime. Let's go out there and try to win the game that way. You did have an opportunity twice. You didn't take advantage of the opportunity, and that's why you end up losing the game. So for me, I'm not mad that Sean didn't go for 2. I'm okay with that. Sean makes a decision. It doesn't always have to be aggressive, Zach.
No, in that situation, like
you're going off of emotion.
No, I'm not. You're
going off of emotion.
I'm not. I think if you believe in any scenario going for 2, that lined up as a scenario to go for 2.
Give me a reason why you felt so confident. All right, there's 3 yards to get a touchdown. You know that the Denver Broncos are going to pass the ball. You don't have a good tight end, and in the red zone, you need a tight end. Zach Ertz wins you the game on the Commanders because he's a good tight end. You need one. You're not going to run the football. So now it's 7-on-7. Everybody's bailing back.
But this is what Sean does anyway. This is what Sean does. This is what he does anyway. Even if he had the run game going, they weren't running it.
I know,
because he doesn't do that. He doesn't even do that during the game. It's a bunch of bull crap that Sean did that. But now you one-side yourself. You make yourself one-dimensional. And now you're sitting here saying, okay, what 2-point conversion is going to work? But no matter what, logic, though. Like think about that logic of opening up the playbook. And I'm not saying it's not a good a point of reference because, hey, I don't need to say it, but I'm going to say it. 2-point conversions are hard. You're tight red zone. The windows are not huge.
But you want to go for it. But you're just so confident.
Because I'm a psycho who thinks that trying to go 3 yards on one play
Zach Bye, the most conservative dude here.
A easier path, about 50%, than playing more football. That team was winning or tied the entire way, and I'm talking about the Bengals. The Broncos were playing from behind.
But they were going neck and neck. There's a reason why that you go into overtime. That means that we scored as many touchdowns as the Bengals scored touchdowns.
Yeah, technically true.
All right.
But in the moment of the game, first of all, let me just address the analytics. The analytics say go for it. Okay, so you have the historical math of being in that scenario saying go for it.
Can't be a prisoner to that. You say it all the time.
No, definitely not. And this is why it's even more impactful because I know the math says go for it. Andrew Mason wrote about it at denversports.com. If you want to go into the weeds of all the numbers, he adds it all up, and it's the math says go for it. But the temperature and texture of the game and Sean's game day gut, I think it says go for it too. You are on the road. You just scored a touchdown with no time left, essentially.
An amazing touchdown.
That was insane. It was psychotic. About 5% chance to pull that off. 95% chance you're not. So, again, you're on the road as an underdog, and throughout the game you've either been tied or trailing. So you're playing catch-up. You pull something off that is just insane at the end of regulation. In my mind, if 2 point is ever on the table, you run one play, you run it, and you get the hell out of Cincinnati and live with the results and not play. The Broncos defense hadn't forced the Bengals to have a single punt in the entire football game, which is just absurd. They eventually did. That comes in overtime after the decision was made.
Okay.
So if you're letting the results dictate the process,
well, you got to
retroactively.
It's not trusting your offense, Zach. It's not trusting Bo Nix, who's a rookie quarterback. It's not trusting that maybe the 2-point conversion play that you had in mind is not going to work. It's just the trust factor for Sean's offense in that moment was not there. And he felt that, hey, let's go into overtime and make this a 10-minute ball game. Hopefully the defense can get a stop, which, guys, the defense is still top 5. You got to be able to trust them at some point. And they did. They made that stop. You get to overtime. You have that opportunity, Zach. I know it's something that, hey, if we got the 2-point conversion, we wouldn't even be talking about this now. But if we did not convert on the 2-point conversion, everybody would be crying about why did we not just go in for the tie and go into overtime.
There would be some.
It's a lose-lose situation for Sean. Sean just has to go with his gut, and his gut you think would go for 2.
But that's my problem.
But they ended up going to overtime, so obviously his gut was going to overtime.
No, his first gut was put up 2 fingers and we're going for 2. So what do you think is more likely, that he talked himself out of it or someone got in his ear and brought up some points and he changed his mind?
Sean is an egomaniac. He loves to put things on his shoulder. He talked his own self out of it. Don't sit here.
Oh, you think so?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't sit here and try to give that man an excuse and say somebody was in his ear.
Oh, no, I'm not trying to give him an excuse, because if you're listening to the wrong consigliere or advisor, that's on you. You're the head of football.
And we talked about it like, hey, if there's alcohol sitting right there and you say, I'm not going to drink, and somebody talks you in the ear and then you start to drink, that's not on that guy. It's on you. And so for Sean, I feel like Sean second-guessed himself. He's decided to go to overtime. You live with it. You had 2 opportunities. You don't make the opportunities count, and you lose the game because of it. So I'm okay with going into overtime, Zach.
Would you have been okay if Sean stuck with his initial gut and went
I would have
for 2?
been okay with that as well. I'm okay with Sean just being confident in himself. I'm okay with Sean making a decision and sticking with it. And I can live with it. Whether he goes for the 2 and makes it or doesn't make it, it is what it is. Whether you go into overtime and you win or you don't, it is what it is. But stick with your gut. And that's something that I will still say Sean does a lot of, is sticking with his gut. It's okay. It didn't happen for you. But there was moments throughout that game, Zach.
Totally.
That if you handle business early, we're not in overtime. We're not in a 2-point conversion situation.
Phil, totally. It was a 60-minute game. And I refuse to just reduce it down to one thing.
But you're mad about the 2-point conversions.
Yes.
So much emotion.
No. I'm reacting to the game. Like I'm sharing my opinion of how the game felt.
All right.
And before the play is pulled off, I'm in my living room saying, you got to go for 2 here.
Because you're hyped up.
No.
Something just happened.
No.
An amazing play just happened. Everybody's going crazy. All the fans are going wild. Of course you want to go for 2, but a coach's job is to take a step back and say, what's the right situation? What's the right thing for this team to win the game tonight?
Well, it was the wrong decision.
Why?
Because they
lost?
They went and lost.
So it's the wrong decision if they decide to take the 2-point conversion and they don't get it. Is it the wrong decision then?
No.
Why? Why is it not the wrong decision then?
Because you
lost.
Right. But I would not be here today saying I can't
Yes, you
believe
would.
Sean. No, absolutely
Yes, you
not.
would.
Phil, so I'm lying when I'm in my living room saying you should go for 2 before the play.
You're
if you
just
have an
like
opinion,
everybody else,
unless you're just like relaxing and
everybody
watching
else,
the game.
Your emotions are running high. Just like a player, I would want to go for 2 too. But it's like being able to take a step back and say, what's best for our team? Everybody thinks going for a 2 is what's best for a team. Cool. But it's Sean Payton's decision. And Sean Payton decided to go to overtime, and they could have won that game.
Just don't tell me he's an aggressive coach.
He is an aggressive coach. That's why my man has a Super Bowl. He has an onside kick in the Super Bowl to win the game. He's an aggressive coach. He doesn't have trust in his young players just yet.
Then why would you sign up for more football when you have to do more in overtime to win?
Because
when your defense
because you
hadn't
had
forced
some
a punt
momentum,
and your
you just had
offense-
some freakish thing happen that put you in a situation anyway. So now it's like, let's ride it out. Defense is bending, but they're not breaking.
No, just
In
capitalize on it.
overtime-
Don't ride it
Zach,
out.
In overtime sucks. Overtime sucks because if a team scores a touchdown, the game is over.
Right.
But if a team kicks a field goal, the opposite opponent gets a chance to go down there and score.
Right.
The Broncos defense was holding the Cincinnati Bengals. Yeah, they were driving down the field, but they were holding them majority of the game to field goals. So for me, it's like if the Denver defense could get a couple sacks, put them in situations where they're uncomfortable, which they did, then we have a chance to win the game. You go into overtime, and you had a chance to win the game, and you don't, Zach.
And what I'm saying is you don't know that your defense is going to force the first punt of the game.
You don't know if you're going to
when you
convert
make
on
that
the
decision.
2-point conversion.
No, I know. And there's risk either way. There is. I'll throw it out to the RamosLaw.com text line. All right. We can maybe have some of the texters weigh in a little bit. I would love to go back and get the temperature because here's what I'll say. This is not one of these situations where there's a definitive right and wrong.
Yeah,
there's not. And I think reasonable minds can disagree on this.
Well, everybody has their hands in the pot. It wasn't just the offense. It wasn't just the defense. It wasn't just a special team, but as a team.
Bo shortcomings as well.
Sean, VJ. Like, it was everybody as a collective group not getting the job done. But that's football. There's 11 men on the field, and you have a coaching staff that has to coach everybody up. And if all 11 are not on the same page in the NFL, usually you will not win games.
Well, just a quick sampling, back-to-back texts. Phil is wrong, and he makes no sense. And then the next text, Zach, you make absolutely no sense. So that's the